Good morning. My name is Pat Cheadle, and some of you have seen the video on doing pine needle baskets. My first one was just to do a tiny little basket. Well, actually, it's about this size. And some of you didn't see as much as you wanted to see about how my hands were doing the actual work. So I'm here today to expand on that. I'm going to show you step by step, with you looking over my shoulder in a minute, how to start a pine needle basket using a piece of wood, piece of cedar, because cedar lasts so long. And with this piece of cedar, it's about 3/8 of an inch thick, and it's been sanded on two sides, and then it has 4 coats of polyurethane on it, and then we've drilled these holes in there so we can use a needle and thread. And I'm going to show you exactly how to start it, and I'm going to really show you how to start it. I'm going to let you see it from the very, very beginning in just a minute. And then I have this one that I brought that I've already done up this far, so that I can show you a little better how you started up the sides. Practically nobody wants one this small, but I'm just have it here this size to show you how to start up the sides, because we're going to make a basket. And then I brought this one to show you how to very smoothly end it. I've seen them ended where they just chop them off, but we want to end it where somebody will say, well, where in the world did that end? It's like the way we started. I don't have any trouble finding my start, and that's because I know that I have started it on the flattest side. I find a flat side, a little bit of a flat side, like this one. This is the flattest place on this whole thing, so I'll start it right here with this. But you want it to look like it was made with one thread, and that it just sort of started and stopped on its own very smoothly. And then we'll show you how to do a center that looks like this when it's finished, and start a pine needle basket on that. I've got this one. I'll show you how to begin it, how to add on thread, how to make your spokes, and then how to start the pine needle basket onto this ring. So that's what we're planning to do today. We're not actually going to make a basket, but we're going to do a lot about the how-tos. Square one, a needle is very easy to lose, and I have a little hard time finding these number 2 embroidery needles. That's the best needle there is if you're going to use the thread or the raffia, as far as I'm concerned. It's not big enough to break up the pine needles, and it's big enough for this nylon thread to go through. And I use one of these. When I finish with it, I stick it in there and maybe wind my thread around that, but you won't lose it. Okay, I'm going to show you how to start a basket using nylon thread. First thing I'm going to do is just simply put my thread through the hole. You want the flattest side of your wooden piece that you can possibly find, and I have to lay it down. And you can't start at the end on this. You've got to give it a little few inches there, a couple of inches to tie it on with until you get started. Because this is the hardest thread in the world to tie a knot in, and it'll slip. If it possibly can, it will slip on you. So I have tied that on, and I'm just going to try just one little loop here. Make sure it gets up on top. And then go to the next one. And if you remember, if you have seen that first video, you know that I always use the V-stitch unless I have a reason for using something else. That means you go in the same place twice every time. And there's 2 or 3 reasons for that. I don't remember if I explained it before. Number one, I think it's beautiful. And number 2, if that thread gets cut and you've only gone around it one time, it will undo itself in no time flat. and you've got a lot of work to do. But if I've gone in there twice, then it will hold. And I'm going to now start adding pine needles, and I want the flat side down on the wood, and I want to get under that. You start out with 7 needles, and you want to turn them upside down. You want to start with the thin side down here, and the rest of the time you'll put the thick side in first, because the thick side has this little white end on it. Let me show you. See this against the black? See how white that is? And there's no white end there. Now the white end is not pretty, but it's very helpful when you're making a basket. And you put in about 2 or 3, and you want it to go down flat under those 7 needles that you started with. Upside down needles, so that it will stay flat. Now you can push that over where it needs to be. And the reason this is called the V-stitch, take a look at it. It looks just like a V. And I used to go down to the Choctaw Indians and show them how to do this. And this one sweet little boy said to me one day he had a hard time trying to figure out how to do the V-stitch. And he looked at me one day and he said, I know what's going to help me remember that. He said, 1 stitch from me, and then go give my neighbors a stitch. And I thought that was about as sweet as I ever heard. So I remember that every time I make a V-stitch. And that one seems like it wants to curl at the end, so it's not going to go under there. If you get them put in right, and I'm going to go all the way around. It's not easy. The first round is your hardest one. Don't give up on the first round. I'm trying to get all the way up under these, so that, there, that's good. No white ends showing. There, got that one in there too. And then go on to your next one. And you've gone in there once, and you have to hold it nice and tight, or it'll really slip off. It's the first round. The rest of them won't be like that. This is just getting that thing started, which is the hardest part. Yeah, once you feel that stick up under there, just quit. Don't try to push it any further. Just feel it's touched solid ground, stop. And I don't put in more than 3 at a time on that first round. You want it to build up gradually, not start off very thin and then just suddenly get fat. And when I thought I had success, I guess I didn't. Have to try again. It feels like that's in there. That feels like it. You can't really see what you're doing right now. You may have noticed I'm working with damp pine needles. Now, I don't always do that, but these had been in my house, in my living room, for a week or 2. And you know, with our heat pumps and all of that, our houses are kind of dry. And I thought, I don't want to take a chance on them being so dry that they break from time to time like that just did. You need to develop a sense of humor, because sometimes when you think you've done it just right, catch your finger or catch a thread, and it's no longer just right. But just try it again. And it's certainly not going to affect the beauty of the pine needle basket. And all pine needles are not alike. Some of them really behave beautifully, and some of them seem like they got a mind of their own. Push those to the top and work with them. Now, if I can get those on the top, the next round's gonna cover it. Yeah, that'll be fine. It's not what I was trying to do, but I'm not going to take up all of your time trying to fix that one needle when I could cover it with the next round coming through. About 3. And then I'm going to show you something else that we've got to do. Remember me telling you about that little white tip on one end and that we started upside down? So now we've got to go back and snip off. This is another little trick I learned. If you put your scissors in a straw, see those little white tips? They'll show if you leave them there. And I try not to get them all the same length. Otherwise, they'll all run out at the same time and there'll be a little bump there in your... So get some long ones and get some short ones and then cut all of those little white ends off once you get going. I think I got them all. I'll show you this in about 2 minutes from where we started to how much we built up now. See, we had nothing showing when we first began. Right here's where we began. See how flat that is? And it's just building up gradually to the right there. We've got a nice little coil. And I think I told you in the first video, when you pick up your pine needles, you always wash them. I wash mine in dishwashing soap in a pan, and then I take a box, I rinse them twice, wash them in soap, rinse them twice, and then I take a box and I wrap a towel around it, an old towel or something fabric, even net if you had just some I can't even think of the word I'm thinking. Screen, wire screening. Just cover it with something so that it can get air from underneath and above. If you do use a towel, just pin it together and air will circulate enough for it to dry. And they'll dry overnight. Just spread them out on that box lid. Because once we get this finished, we're going to put a polyurethane on it so that we can wash it. And we'll know we started out with a nice clean basket. See, my coil's just almost there now. And I'm using a fairly short piece of thread because I want to show you what you do if you thread, when your thread runs out. And it will. Doing these V-stitches takes quite a bit more thread than if you were just wrapping it singly. But I think you get two things out of this V-stitch. You get the beauty of it. It always shows you where the next stitch goes. It goes right in between these two threads. And it looks better than a single stitch. And it's safer than a single stitch. This is kind of slow. This first stitch, first row especially, is kind of slow. but we're just about there. And I need to show you what you do when you start your first row of coiling, because it's a little bit different from the rows thereafter. One thing I don't know if I stressed to you or not, this has to be the world's cheapest hobby. Pick up your pine needles and they cost you nothing. If you cut your own little pieces of cedar and do those, it costs you very, very little. A little bit of course, everybody knows that polyurethane.
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
Costs very, very little for the thread. One spool of thread. I go to Hobby Lobby and get mine, and because I teach this, because at the time I was going down and teaching the Indians, they gave me 30% off, gave me a coupon that said 30% off of that anytime you want it. They always have the good thread. So that's where I get mine. If you buy your centers, and you can also buy the thread, buy the needles, you can buy every bit of this. But if you get out there and pick up the pine needles and do them yourselves, you'll have a hard time putting more than $2 in one of these baskets. But you do put time in there. But I live alone, so I'm very grateful to have something that I enjoy doing when I sit down at night. Now, we have made it all the way around, so I'll show you how you tag on. If you look at that first stitch that I made, there's only one there, one thread. And the reason for that is that's number one, and I could put that needle in there over and over and over and over, but I'd still only have one in there. So I'm glad it's like that, because now I'm going to put it back into the where I started and go one time. And see, we don't really have a V-stitch like the others. And there's no coil. There's just those 7 little old needles. But slide under them and then go on to the next one. Go under, all the way under, 100% under those first pine needles that you put in there. That's the only way you have of attaching it right now, to keep it from popping out, and be as gentle as possible, because those little 7 needles are on the very fragile end of the thing, and here you are pulling it kind of tight. But do it anyway, but just do it carefully. I'm just about ready to show you how to tie more thread on. Didn't understand. Okay, we're going to show you how to okay. Now you do understand what I'm doing. You can see it better maybe. I'm going all the way under what I have down there. And you see I've got about 1 or 2 more stitches with this thread. And then I'm going to show you how to tie on more thread and cover it up so that they think you just took one thread and made that whole thing. And don't cut it off too short. In case I forget to tell you later on, let me tell you now. Okay. Here's our next stitch. Hold it up. I know my hands are almost covering it. You use all 6 hands with that first row. Can you see that? This is different from the way you're going to do it when you get to the full coil. Maybe I got 1 more stitch before I have to tie on. I'm Scotch Irish, so I'll get every stitch I can with a thread because that's one of the things I buy. At least people have said that to me. But why cut it off and throw it away if you don't need to? Another thing I've learned, I used to use those plastic straws that you throw away after one use. So now I went down and got some that I can use permanently. And they say that the plastic straws are a problem in the ocean and so forth with our fish, etc. And they do just litter. Now, see, I take my thread off, and my thread's way over there. Wind off some more thread. Doesn't matter which end you tie on, I've learned that. I take my needle out and lay it down. If you want to, I've got a nice black cover here, but you may not have it home. So put it in there so you can see it. Or maybe you don't lose your needles like I do. But I get very nervous when there's a loose needle because they can work their way into your foot or whatever. You tie this, a square knot if you possibly can, and you tie it just as low as you can. And I haven't done a very good job of that, so I'm going to start over. You want it to be very low. What's happening is my bandage on my wounded finger is catching it. So I'll be a little more careful here. Hold your finger right there and finish that knot. Now, take the end of the thread that you're tying on and bring it back up and tie it the third time. And that's the only way I've ever been able to keep one of these knots to stay where it's supposed to be. And I use about 2 yards at a time. I've got one more thing to show you. This will shred a little bit, but not if you keep one of these little glue sticks here and just put it on there and put a little glue on the very tip. See, we're not going to put this tip on the, it's not going to be part of the basket anyway, but it won't shred so. Put my thread. See, I almost lost my needle when I put it where it ought to be. Threading your needle. Some people have a hard time with this. I put it between these two fingers where I can barely see it, and then I press my needle onto that, and it just works like a charm. Of course, I've been doing this for 60 years, so you might have to work at it to get it to work quite that well. Now here's the magic part. When we finish with this, we do not want that to show. So I start pulling it tight and get that knot up on top of that coil. And I'm still going under that coil because it's still not fully grown. Not as big as it will be when we get our gauge full. Then I take these two pieces and I just hold them on the very top like that. And see, this thread's going to cover it. And then the next time I go around this, my next coil will go right over the top of that and nobody will ever know we tied on there. I have one student that's just absolutely determined to cut it off short. I cut it off. I leave plenty of room in case and my gauge is full is the reason I'm not adding needles right now, because these needles are nice and long, and once in a while you get 2 or 3 stitches without having to add needles. You want to come out right between those 2 threads. Showing you how to start it and how to tie on more thread and how to cover that thread. And always leave it long enough that you could thread your needle and tie it if it ever gets cut or a knot comes undone or something like that. I don't want to make the basket but once, but if somebody were to accidentally snag it, cut it, tear it, whatever, then I could patch it using that and still have my basket. Okay, that's it. And when you just keep going around, and when you get right here, see, we're big enough now, we're going right in the middle of this. We're coming out right in the middle. Let me show you one more time there. We're coming out, instead of going under like we started out, now we're cutting it right in the middle. Our needle's right in the middle of that coil, and you just pull it on through. And this is where you're glad you've got a nice embroidery needle that's fairly small, and it's not breaking a single pine needle as it does it. And we're holding it. I'm holding the thread tight here. If you don't keep those threads tight, when you get through, you'll have a pine needle basket that you can shake it. It'll shake, rattle, and roll. Okay, well that does that one. And this is the way supper time, I want to leave it. So wind your thread around there, and then just stick it into here, and you're ready to go. Now the next thing when I say keep it tight, that's nowhere near shaky or anything. It's nice and tight. Okay, the next thing I'm going to show you is how to go up the sides. Now that does it for the bottom, and you're probably never going to want to make one this small. I'm just using this as an example of how to go up the sides and make a basket or a tray or whatever you want to make. First thing I learned to do was make a thing to put my rolls or my biscuits in on the table, or crackers or that sort of thing. And I put a little thing on the back of it so I could hang it on the wall when I didn't need it, and then I would throw a napkin in it and put in my biscuits, and we passed it. And it's a pretty little thing on the table. Okay, now slide this on out here to the next stitch. Don't take this is one of those permanent straws. Don't take your straw, your gauge, any further than the next stitch. And you'll have a nice tight basket. These have been thrown around a little bit, but we can still do it, I think. Hold your thread nice and tight. Go right in the middle. And don't turn around to the back and look. Just get in the habit of doing it all from the front, because I'm going to tell you, the back looks different from the front. And I've seen students turn it around, look at the back, and look at the front, turn it around, look at the back, and trying to figure out just now, where do I put this next needle? And because they don't look the same way, it's confusing to them. And it's just so much easier if you get used to, sort of like playing golf. They say, put your eye on where you want the ball to wind up. So I want that needle to wind up right in the middle here. And it's right in the middle here. Okay, now I told you I was going to show you how to go up the sides. You don't just suddenly decide I want to go up now. You've got to look at your basket and figure out, where did it start? It started right there. But see, that is such a thin little coil in there. I'm not going to start up until I get to about here. I'll go around that curve there maybe. And you'll have little stickers like this sticking all over it. Just break it off. Just break that off. That'll never show. And that doesn't matter. There is absolutely no way to hide them all. But you're hiding 99% of them. And when those little things come in there like this right here, just take your fingernail and break it off. Now, so we're going to go until we have a real, almost completely full coil before we start going up. So I've got just a couple more stitches here to get there. If you get it too near the top and then pull it tight, I promise you, you will hear the pine needles start popping, breaking. You don't want to do that. And a lot of people, when they cut their pine needles, there's a little binder, I call it, at the top, and you get about 3 or 4 pine needles after you cut the binder off. And if you cut the binder off low enough, you won't have that old white end. I don't ever want that white end to show, but when it comes to putting my pine needle into the coil, I'm so grateful for that pine needle, little white streak on my pine needle. So I leave it on there and use it. I use it to tell me when, now look, we're there. See that, I can see that first coil, very, very plain. So somebody told me that's going to be the hardest part. Well, it may be, but there's nothing hard in pine needle basket making. You just simply take hold of it and pull it up there. Just hold of it, pull it up there. Now I look behind because I want to make very sure I can't see it from the front. I've got it covered. It looks real funny when you first get started, but after you put that second row on there, nothing funny about it. And you have to hold that. It'll slip right back down there if you don't. Just hold it up there for a few minutes until it gets used to it. Put in about 3. These are very thin pine needles. They're nice ones. Got to tell you, this couple of students, excellent pine needle basket making students, but neither one of them had a long needle pine. So they said, well, where are we going to get our pine needles? And so I gave them a bunch, and then when they just used those in no time at all. And then they called me one day and they said, we found us a supply of pine needles. And I said, how did you do that? And she said, we saw a man mowing a yard, and we stopped, and we asked him if he mowed several yards in the neighborhood, and he said, oh yeah. And he said, well, you don't know of a yard that's got a long needle pine tree in it, do you? And he said, yes. And he gave them the address, and they went and knocked on the door, and they said, do you mind if we come over and pick up some pine needles? And they said, no, be our guest. So they just went over and picked them up in a neighbor's yard before he went over to mow. And they were ready to get rid of the pine needles, and my friends were ready to take them. So that just worked out great. And they brought me a big bunch of those, even though I have a long needle pine in my front yard. I told my husband I was interested in this, and 2 or 3 days later, he's setting out a baby long needle pine in the front yard. And I've been getting them right out of my front yard now for years and years and years and years. You go all the way to the bottom on this first row. And after we get that first row on there, you will no longer go all the way to the bottom. See, some of them just jump out there, but you're going to cover them up, so never mind it. Going to cover them up, and we're going to put this on there and make them behave themselves. And then round number 2 is going to cover them. Now, I'm going to run out of thread. That's nice and full. See, our stitches are longer here, and you have to You must remember to keep that gauge full of needles. If you don't, you're just going to have it'll take you 3 or 4 times as long to make a basket as it will if you just keep your gauge full, because your coil will be small and floppy and lay right flat against the one below it, and you'll have to go make 3 or 4 rows just trying to make one. And all it takes is just keep poking these needles in there until you feel it is kind of tight. Well, I hadn't planned to, but I'm going to have to show you how to tie on again because I've run out of thread. Guess that's just probably nearsightedness on my part, but maybe one more time showing you how to tie on. Hold it very, very close to where your needle comes out. You'd think that I'd want to tie it up on top, but this stuff stretches. And like anything else, you got to get acquainted with what you're working with. This is nylon thread, 100% nylon, and therefore it feels like silky, really silky and slippery. I said to one little Indian boy one time, I declare, I believe this stuff, it's so strong you can't break it, that's why I use it. I believe this stuff would pull a semi-tractor and trailer out of a mud hole. And he said, fully loaded. So it's credit that it doesn't break, but it is really slippery and hard to get along with. But I like it much better than I do the sinew that they sell, because to me that looks a little bit on the artificial side. And I'm still going to put my little dab of glue on here, because if it starts shredding, you start cutting and throwing, and that means you have to stop more often and rethread your needle. So it's time wasted, thread wasted, lots of stuff wasted. I'd just rather do it this way. Get that knot up there, a good pull will do it. No matter how tight I tie it down in there, if I give it a good pull, it'll go all the way to the top. And if you don't give it that good tight, it'll go all the way to the other side, and then you can't cover it. And I have one student, no matter what I say to her, she'll cut it, tie it up anywhere, and then just take scissors and cut it off about 1/4 of an inch away. And 2 or 3 times I've seen her knot come undone, and she has to take it out a long way to repair it. I wanted to begin to get that second row on there before I stopped, is the reason we're still doing the V-stitch, still going across here. And see, it's that first row doesn't exactly look like it's up on top, but it really is. If you pull it anymore, now then, I got my little strings are pretending they got a mind of their own. So just get them back under here and wrap that right around them. That's something else about leaving them with a long string. In case one of them does get loose, you can just thread the needle, thread it right into the needle, and poke it right back in. And it'll knot up. And quite often, all you've got to do if you've got a knot is give it a yank. Just give it a yank. And if that's not true, then just take your needle and pick it out. And of course, if you can't pick it out, then you can always cut it down near your basket and start it like you have just tied on. I've never had one like that, but I've seen my students have to do that. The main thing is just fix it pretty when you fix it. You'll be there soon, I hope. One of the things I may or may not have told you in that last video, I can't remember. These, I have never given one for a gift that I didn't think they were truly, truly grateful and truly enjoyed having it. I did give a couple people, friends of my granddaughters, one time, and they took it home and they put a candle in it. They lit the candle and forgot it. It burned way down and set the basket on fire. And they called me up and wanted to know if I would replace it. She said, we didn't think about it burning. I said, it's just pine needles. It says right on it, it's pine needles. Of course it will burn. I did that. I don't know if I can undo that or not. Anything you mess up, you can also clean up with this stuff. I usually tell my student, if you've got something that isn't right, let me know, because there is nothing that I haven't seen in the years I've been doing pine needle. There's no way to make a mess that I haven't made before you. And I can clean it up. Okay, right here is where we started up, so we don't have too much more of you to watch here. Although I did have one person say to me, I sure wish you'd have done a few more of those V-stitches and let us see more than just one or two. Well, you've certainly seen a bunch of them since I started this. Now, see this thread? Some things you don't have to worry about. We have put in about, at least 4 or 5 inches of that thread, so I can just chop that off without worrying about it one bit. Talking about giving them for gifts. I got an invitation to a wedding one time, and then right down in the corner it said, by the way, I would love a pine needle basket. And I started laughing. I thought, I think she means as a wedding gift. And I called her and she laughed. She said, yeah, that is what I meant. I would love to have a pine needle basket. pleased me that she even wanted one. Okay, we just like another stitch or two, and we're going to be there. And then the only thing I wanted to show you is we no longer go down to the bottom of this thing and go up. We attach it to the coil below. That's what you always do, is attach it to the coil below. And it happened that when we were putting that first one up there and we're going up to the top, the coil below happens to be the last coil that we put on the, but now we are covering them. So I just want to show you the change, and then we're going to let this go. Another reason, if you just keep putting pine needles in here, 2 or 3, with every stitch, every single stitch, if it will hold them, is that keeps them from running out at the same place. See how different these links are? Anything from right in there. And if you keep putting them in there, they're getting longer and longer and longer, sticking out further and further, so they don't run out. All of them don't run out the same place. Well, now I am up high enough to, I'm no longer going to the bottom. Look, see this one right here? That's a coil. So I'm going to go into that coil and attach this, not down to the bottom. And there is one more thing I'm going to show you or tell you right quick. Some people don't like their stitches this wide. And that is so simple to repair. If your stitches get too wide and you want them smaller, and there's no reason in the world for you to change anything except you want to change it, just go right in the middle and add another stitch. Do the same thing. Doesn't have to be in the V. Okay? And there's one of the things that looks really pretty if you take raffia and just wrap a whole row and then do halfway stitching. And you can see when I go across there, you're not going to be able to see where I added on. So you see, we're going up the sides. Okay, so we'll put this one down now, and I want to show you how to end it. And they used to make this stuff so tight they could carry water in it. And they have bound to have been using vines. They didn't have a good thread. Now, am I talking to it now? Oh. I didn't realize that I was talking to you. Okay, see, this is a good example right here of why I do this. See how it's already divided? And we don't want it to divide, because you can't sew that. Now, this is the end of my thread, and I don't want it to split anymore. So I'm just using the glue. Okay, now on this one, I have just tied on here. I wanted to make sure you saw how to tie it on, so I've tied it on this is the third time. I want to show you where to stop it. You don't just suddenly decide, otherwise you're going to have a bumpy side, but we want it to be smooth on the top. Okay, if I started it, and I can tell by looking, here's the flat side, and right in here I can see it just beginning and coming right into here. And along about here is the first time you've got a coil right there that's big enough that you can really call it a coil. So we're going to begin our ending this coil right here. when we wind up, we want it to come from here to here, and the last of our pine needles finish off here. But now we've got to go over this because we've just added, and we want to make sure we're going to cover that. So pull it up to the top. You can tell that this is one that I have used before because it's still curly, and they'll stay that way for quite a while as you wet them down. You know something? I'm looking at this now, and I'm going to tell you something. That is not enough thread to go all the way around and then finish it off. So why don't we just, right here, so we don't have a problem later on, cut that thread. I'm showing you how to clean up a mess right now, because that's not enough thread to put this final row on and then finish it. We like a nice, clean finish. So let's put on enough thread to do that without having to tie any more on. I don't think I was thinking about really finishing it there. I'm going to do about 2.5 yards, and then I know that I can finish that up because you've got a nice little finish at the very top that really does look good. Now we're going to have to take one of these stitches out. Now we're going to have to take out a little bit more than that so we can tie this thread on. Just going to tie it on. Get it just as close in there as I possibly can. My needle. Fix this. Now we won't have to hurry. We won't have to worry either about making a mess at the top here. To the next stitch. See, there's your knot that I was talking about. And I'm going to tell you what helps that not to happen, but I can't do it right now because I only got 2 hands. If you run that thread through 2 fingers, it just about never ever knots. But I'm having to hold this top thread on here. Maybe I could find 2 fingers to run it through. It's when it jumps up on itself that it knots. Yeah. If this is more than you want to put in, you can not film me until I get a little closer to it. But it's going to be 1 full round is all it's going to be. It loves to wrap itself right around that little basket. Since I live alone, I also have Esmeralda living there, so when things go wrong, I didn't do it, Esmeralda did. So I say that the basket does this. Sometimes those pine needles and thread do sort of feel like they got a mind of their own. See, I'm coming all the way back to right here before I start that. So if you want to just turn that off, this is going to be a lot of weaving. It's up to you. Watching it talk to me this morning. Okay, we're ready to start winding this down now. And you don't want to stop all in one place, but right here's where it started, and here's where the first one is. Well, you can't just, that's where we want to wind up. So you start off, this is going to be a little smooth. You don't add needles from here on in unless it goes down too fast. We'll just have to watch it and see. You just keep this up. Just keep making your V-stitches, but you're not adding needles. That's the difference. We want it to come off nice and smooth, and right here's where we started. So here's where we want to start slowing it down. See, we've still got a good size coil, but that's because it's right where we started, and we don't have that coil in between. And I'm going to check it over here. Looks like that's going to be just about perfect. So I'm not going to add a thing. And I'm not going to start cutting anything out. You can, if your needles are very, very long and you think they're going to reach over farther than you want them to, you can start snipping about one or two long ones to make it come out about right. And see, we have several there that's about the same size, so we don't have one or two needles that's sticking out there. It's just the same old stitch. You just sort of watching how flat it is, or is it? See how fast this thing goes when you're not adding needles? I'll show you in a minute when I wanted all that thread. I guess it's like that. It got hung in something and I have to figure out how to straighten that up. You know, I didn't introduce you to my friend. I was still thinking about my basket. That's Lou Provo. She lives here and she's getting over a stroke. And I hadn't seen her during that length of time, so I said, well, how about when I'm finished, I'll take you to lunch. And you can call that your flowers while you're in the hospital. We're just getting down smaller and smaller. smaller and smaller. Might look silly to cover those, but we don't have a bump. It goes smoothly. But that is as far as I go. Now, if you look, you can just break those off and it's not any problem. See how many I'm sticking up? Well, don't worry about them yet, because we're going to turn around and go backwards and go into every one of those V-stitches to put a finishing touch on our basket. And it'll do two things. It looks really pretty, it looks finished, and it covers a lot of those little pine needle points that's sticking up there. And you go all the way around with this. And there ain't no use for me to do it. You just go into every V, every single one of those straight up stitches, all the way around. And then when you get through, you just take your needle, stick it right straight down through it, and cut it off on the back side. So I'm going to call that a stop on that, and I'm going to get with the raffia. Cut them cedar, and they might get tired of having a cedar center. So there's I think these are beautiful, and they're fairly inexpensive, and you make them yourself. And you could do other things besides what I've done, and all you've got to do is alter how many of these you put in there and how you do them in order to make another design. But I'm going to just show you the one design today, and I'm going to start off by showing you how you are supposed to start off. When I'm using raffia, I take a wet washcloth and I just come down across it, and it will work so much better because this stuff dries out like crazy. And you fold your raffia in half, put it on your ring, pull it through, and see you've got a little notch there. You take one piece and bring it down and leave the other one up. And when you're down, you go over, above, and then pull it through. Now I've got a little notch below. And take the top one and you push it down through instead of up through. So it's down through, up through for the bottom and down through for the top. Let me do that again and do it very slowly. Hold it. You don't want to make a big old ring or you'll get it caught on that ring. Just make a little loop and bring it up through for the bottom. Pull it. Take hold of the top, push it down through, and then up through, and give it a little pull. And just keep going. Now, that's how you start it. Now, this raffia will never take it all the way around. So when you run out, when you get to where you don't have enough thread to do it anymore, I could probably do one more here. You add on other raffia, and I'm going to show you how to add raffia right in the middle of this. Then how to stop it. So we'll reach get our raffia out and find a piece of raffia that's going to work for us. This one might be too big, but too thick. Maybe a little bit. If you take your needle or your thumbnail, in fact, my thumbnail was already hard at work at this, and then just take your finger and go right down it. You can split it. And this is about the size we want for the loops. Again, find your center, fold it in your center, and put it down right over this. One up and one down. But you look to see, so the next one would be down. So holding all of that the very best you can, make a loop and bring all of them up through there. And then tighten them all. And then do the same thing you've been doing at the top, only you add the new piece. Keep doing it with that used piece, but add the new piece. And now you don't have to do it but about once or twice with adding that. I'm going to do it one more time on each of them. And then you can separate that old and just cover it with this and then cut it out. Whatever's left. See, there's one nice one at the bottom. See if we can do the same thing at the top. Getting kind of short. Let's try that again. Got some of it, but I didn't get it all. Let's try to get it all. I missed that one, but I'm going to let it go. And then just lay that over here. Somebody else has got allergies or a cold.
Allergies.
Me too. Josh too. Now you can just lay these over here and go right across the top of them from now on. Not going to be much of now on because I didn't leave much space, but there's one. And there's two. Do another one too here. Now, let's just cut them out. We have tightened them and covered them, and I don't think there's any chance in the world they're going to start coming out. And now we can go ahead and do the rest of this. And you can slide that back and just put as many on there as you want to. I want a few more. Do about twice more. And then I'm going to anchor them and start making spokes. I call them spokes because they're on a wheel and we have to use them to make our design in the middle. Okay. Do that because I'm going to, a little bit premature. I'm doing that. I'll put my needle. Okay. My little, here they are, extra needles. I didn't get that. I see why I didn't get that. It's not all the same length. It's got to be the same length for it to all go in at one time. There. Now this is the way you close it off. Just reach over here and go into one of those loops. And then pull it together. And I do one, and then I bring it back to the other side. And I do 2 or 3 of these. And then it's anchored in there. Okay, now I'm going to start making spokes. And I don't want the spokes to be that thick. So I just eyeball it. To me, that's half of it right there. You don't want to get this tight now. And I go into every loop. I'm not trying to tighten that at all. Yeah, I'm not going to go into that loop. That's awfully tight, close. And then I'm going if you come out on the right hand side, you go to the left side of it. And now I'm on the left hand side, I'm going to come out on the right side. See what I mean? And I'm on the right hand side of the work now. Come up. I'm on the right hand side. I'm going to the left side. I'm on the left side. I'm going to the right side. There it is. Now there's not enough left here to do it again. So I'm just going to anchor it off. I'll start up here. I'll go around here. And maybe back to here. There's no set way to do that. And then cut that one off. And you pick up the next piece. And this is just on and on and on and on, so I'm not going to do them all. There's no point in it. But I'll have to cross over here now. And when I get through with this one, I will tighten that one up and start using it the same way. To make these spokes. If I come from the right, I go to the left. If you're on the left, you go to the right. Okay. That is enough of that. Then when you get through...
Maybe just hold it up to the...
Hold it up. Yeah. You just continue that until you get spokes on all the way around, like this. That's the one I'll be able to show you how to finish it up.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. And now I have one here that we have finished up, and I'm going to show you how to See, this is what I chose to do. When you get through, you've got to count them. And I just take my thumbnail and hold it there and start counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And if you wind up with how many, you decide how many of these little things you want it put in there. I'm going to have 6, I think. Yeah, 6. I like 7, but because of the number to divide it even, it wasn't going to come out. I decided I'll just put 6 in there. So I've done all 6 of them. I've done 5 of them. I've got one more to show you how to do that. You just start off with your. This has to be thinner because the way you're working it. You go under 1, over 1, under 1, over 1, under 1, over 1, under 1. Pull out your needle and thread, and then be very careful because you're working with a very thin piece of thread here. Slide it down here, and then wrap it around the one you didn't get, which is this one. That will go under, over, under, over, under, over, under, and pull it through again. And then we'll go under that last one, over, under, over, under, over. Then same thing again. And I'm looking at the others now to see when I start leaving off. The only way that makes that pattern is to just start leaving off some of these. I'm not going to do it quite yet. I'm going to do it about twice more here, and then I'm going to start leaving those off. And those rings are not that easy to find, but they're not that difficult either. There's a place up near Mount Airy, North Carolina on Route 74 that has all sizes, and the best place that I know of to get them, but I don't know the name of it. They have pottery and crafts there, and it's right at the end of I-74. Now, I'm going to leave that last one off this time. We're just going to leave him standing there. Okay, see, we're not going to do a thing to it. You're just going to pick up these others. I'm going to do that about twice, then I'm going to leave off another one. And leave them off on the same side, always. Next time I'll leave him off.
Just as easily happen here. It's just.
I'm gonna leave it about at least twice, and then leave off another one. Next time I'll leave off one more. Leaving off one more now. more. And you probably pay a little more attention to what you're doing than I am right now, because I'm trying to get it to where I'm just showing you how here. And you can count how many to leave off each time and all of that, and get it right down to the nitty-gritty, just the way you want it. And when you get through, you can anchor your thread up here at the top of this, or you can, I'll show you what I do in between. I run it right down through here to the center. This is a handy little thing to have when you're doing pine needle baskets. Harbor Freight has them for $1 a piece. But I wouldn't take anything for mine. They help me out so much. And then just go back and forth in here 2 or 3 times to anchor it, because that's a good solid center. Now that's done. And you just simply cut that off. And cut this off. And then we have one more thing I want to show you, and then we're going to be through with this. I want to show you how to start this pine needles on there. It's actually the same way you did on the other side. Don't seem to have any small ones here. You need 2 or 3 small ones anytime you start. And here the small ones come. 1 and 2. There's a small one. Here's a small one. There's a small one. And we got here. Need about 7. And this is when you turn them upside down. Remember, we've done that once before today. Got 1, 2, 3, 4. That looks pretty big. 5, 6, 7, right there. And then get you a gauge. When I say gauge, all I'm talking about is some sort of there's one. I've got a friend takes medicine every single week. Every single day, prescribed medicine, so she saves her medicine bottles for me. And I use them to store stuff in. Looks like a good place to divide that. I used to get the best raffia at Hobby Lobby, and I can't do that anymore. They stopped selling that same kind. And as I showed you on your last video, the hard part about raffia is trying to figure out which end it grew on, and I think it's that one right there. And I've been wrong and had to reverse it a few times. I'm hoping I'm not this time. But I think this is You have to put the end that grew on the bush. You have to thread it, otherwise it'll shred. Okay. Ready. Put your needles in your gauge and do it exactly the same way you did on the other one. Now, this side does not look like this side. You have to decide which one you want in the middle and which one you want on the bottom. So I'm going to do it this way. And you do it just exactly like I did when I was doing the thread. I mean, doing the thread. Except you're sewing on a different surface. And there's no way to tie this raffia. So I just wrap it around one time and bring it on back around over here and just cover it. And I've never had one come out yet. I'm gonna make these stitches a little bit closer, I think. And then they can, instead of having to split my stitches later on, they'll just get bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's it. That's the only thing that's different about this. And except we may have to cut those needles off because they don't seem to want to come to get pulled. They're a little damp. There they go. I'm just going to do 2 or 3 stitches. Everything is just like the other one that I showed you. It's a little bit harder to get your needles in here than it is in the other one. If you get them there and just hold them and do a close stitch. The thing only reason I'm doing this at all is to show you go into these loops. That's how you attach it. And when that does that, the only thing you can do is just stop and straighten it out. And I'll never know why it does it. Except, nope. I'm going to put about 1 more stitch, and then we're going to call it quits. Because it's just like it was on the other one. Except you really got to work at this first row a little harder. And that's one of the reasons I'm putting my stitches much closer together than I did on the other one. And so I can hide those ends of it. And you can't build it up as fast, or I never could. Okay, that's it. You just keep doing more and more of the same. And that's but the one I did want to show you something. That's just straight stitching. But if you want to use it decoratively. If you see, I've put a few in here and then gone a couple of rows and then added some, and all that is wrapping raffia. Just take your raffia and wrap it solid to the next stitch. And I think it's kind of attractive if you wrap it, and see, I've used raffia here, but I use thread in there. Now if I had, next time I do it, I will go back to raffia for that final stitch, final 3 rows up here. But see, even when you go down and pick up a stitch, it's a little bit of a decoration in it. Right here's where we started, here's where we stopped. But if you take a good look, you can figure out where we stopped our basket. But it's, you have to know basket weaving to know where we finished up on that on this basket. Even I'm having trouble. I think it's right here. Right here is where we took that last stitch. But see, you can't, it's not all that obvious. Okay, well, happy pine needle basket making. And if you, with each kit, you get my name and a telephone number and address and so forth. And if you have a question, give me a call. I'll take the time to see if I can't make it more clear than I have made it in this video.